How a Romance Novel Saved the Galaxy by Ariana de Rolte. Chapter 51. Interludes 2. What had initially attracted Thilsa to Brilla was the care she had shown for Kiro when she was injured. Being a small independent bounty hunter, Brilla hadn't had a bacta tank on her ship, but she had bustled Kiro into what Thilsa later learned was Brilla's own bunk, cleaned the wound, then practically poured a whole bottle full of bacta into it. Thilsa had used the Force to keep her Padawan under for the days it took the bacta to work, with the Durasteel shard removed and the area cleaned and sanitized. Thilsa had also been able to bring her own Force healing skills to bear to take care of the worst of the internal damage. Brilla, meanwhile, had set the ship on course for the nearest planet with healing facilities, though that had been away from the galactic core. Thilsa had woken up after sitting beside her Padawan for several hours to Brilla's touch on her shoulder, asking to clean Thilsa's own wound. She'd been efficiently shunting her pain off into the Force and forgotten to tend to it in her rush to save Kiro. With more sleep under her belt, Thilsa had been able to see that the Mandalorian was attracted to her, but the only sign of it in her actions was the blush on her cheeks as she tended to Thilsa's leg. Brilla was bubbly and fun, two traits she'd have never thought to associate with a Mandalorian. As soon as Kiro woke up, Brilla seemed to be at her side at all hours, telling her stories of pranks she'd played on friends, or that had been played on her in turn, asking truly ridiculous questions to distract Kiro whenever she seemed to be in pain, and telling her legends from Mandalorian and Mingpol history. Brilla had come with them to the clinic on the planet they found, and paid for all the services when Thilsa's back was turned. Of course, that had backfired in the end, when they didn't have enough credits for fuel and supplies to get them back to the temple, but they had done a bunch of odd jobs and made it back only a month later than expected. She was a bit embarrassed how quickly she, this stoic Jedi Master, had fallen for the irrepressible Mandalorian, who freely admitted that she was very interested in Thilsa, not just physically, but romantically as well. It had helped that her shy Kiro had blossomed under the attention of the friendly Mandalorian. Thilsa and Kiro had accepted the vambraces from Brilla as a promise. She hadn't, at first, been aware of what accepting armor from a Mandalorian meant. She had just thought it was a sign so other Mandalorians wouldn't bother them. Then Brilla had excitedly adopted Kiro and referred to Thilsa as her fiancé, and Thilsa had wanted that. Wanted them both to belong to Brilla as a little family. Wanted Brilla to meet Thilsa's former master and charm him like she had Thilsa. Wanted Brilla with them always. It was attachment in its most dangerous form. Thilsa had spent one of the last days of their journey in deep meditation. She had resolved to do her duty and let Brilla go if that was what was asked of her. But Kiro was already adopted, so they would have to deal with that no matter what. For herself and Brilla, the Force had simply told her to be patient. She had explained the situation to Brilla, who had cheerfully agreed to a long, possibly indefinite engagement. Thilsa had wondered how Brilla could be so optimistic about their chances, but now that she had read the Mandalorian's dilemma and realized she had experienced the changes it was making to Mandalorian culture firsthand, Thilsa wasn't as worried. She was, however, going to track her fiancé down and tell her that her plans for a desert getaway were ridiculously unsettled. Ube Vesta still hadn't managed to finish reading the damn book. For all they had sent the message last week, urging the entire order to read it, finding the time to do so in amongst all their other duties seemed like an impossible project. Case in point, Ube was reading about the characters beginning to rescue the poor Twi'lek girl Kiri when one of the many alarms they had set on the temple's comm systems went off. The Force nudged them as well. They put the pad down, knowing that they weren't going to get back to it for a while. A quick check confirmed what the Force was nudging Ube about. It was that damn Mandalorian slicer again! Their hands moved lightning quick to pull up the special program they'd made. Ube hit send, holding their breath. There was no knowing how long the slicer would remain connected. It was a bit of a toss-up on whether or not enough of the program would get transmitted to matter. The slicer made the unwise mistake of staying connected for several seconds while they tried to break through the temple security into the Jedi personal files, specifically the core files this time. Then the connection dropped abruptly. Ube grinned. They could imagine the chaos as their program started messing with the Slicer's console. The Slicer would have to be very fast and very good if they were going to get ahead of it to prevent it from corrupting their whole system. Ube pulled up the book again and read for several minutes before they got another alert. They looked at their pads. It was a simple call message originating from Concord Dawn. Ube scanned it 6 different ways before they dared to open it. Wow, you really kicked my shems. Would you like to meet Star Slice? Ube sighed and shut the message down. Mandalorians were ridiculous. Siath had been settled at the side table in the archives for several hours now. Her assignment as an Agricor member from Master Plet was to research any knowledge on the original flora, fauna, and ecosystem of the planet Mandalore. It was a difficult task. She had plenty of second and third-hand, rather dubious sources, and a ridiculous amount of information about mythosaurs. But if the Mandalorians had ever written anything about their planet down other than the battles fought on it, the Jedi Archive didn't have those accounts. Reading The Mandalorian's Dilemma, it was obvious that the author didn't know much about the ecology back then either, considering they had set it in a convenient desert which mirrored the current conditions on Mandalore rather than the more likely environments that accompanied the jungles, which were said to have spread across large swaths of ancient Mandalore. Siath had read it eagerly for hints, but other than a force-sensitive tree whose species wasn't defined, there hadn't been any mention of the ecology. Thinking about it now, though, perhaps she was going at this the wrong way. She got up, scrolling through her pad for the proper shelf numbers. Then she bumped into surprisingly hard robes. "Ow!" she said. The being she had run into was also looking startled, since they had been looking down at their own pad. They had blonde hair with tanned skin and purple eyes. Their robes seemed overly large, bulging in places. She didn't usually expect bulges. They laughed. "We both weren't looking where we were going, were we?" Siath gave a small smile. At least they were a fellow researcher. "No, we weren't. I'm Siath. She, her." "Minnie, he, him. I keep going down the wrong shelves looking for the Mandalorian history section. Your shelves all look the same." Was he not a Jedi? Independent researchers were allowed in the archives on the permission of Madame Nu, but why would he be wearing Jedi robes then? "You're in the right aisle. It's to your right, but perhaps you should explain to me why you're wearing Jedi robes if you're not one." She tried to make her voice as stern as possible. Benin looked sheepish. He parted the tightly closed front of his robes to reveal a Mandalorian breastplate. "Madame didn't want me distracting anybody with my armor. I think she sensed I didn't want to take it off, even though I would have for the opportunity to work with her here. She's amazing, isn't she?" "Amazingly strict, maybe." "I see. Well, I have a large amount of historical records on my table over there, so if you don't find something, I probably have it." Or some other Jedi did. The Mandalorian's Dilemma had certainly seemed to inspire some Jedi to research. A thought occurred to her. "I'm researching ancient Mandalore's ecology. I'm heading to the geology and ecology sections to see if they might have some mentions, but I would like to talk to you about Mandalorian sources." Benin's eyes lit up. "I'd be happy to." It was nice to meet a fellow eager researcher, though it helped that he was easy on the eyes. Suddenly it went, "Well, maybe not in the archives. I don't want to be assigned punishment by Alor Nu again." Siaz suppressed a grin. Even visiting Mandalorians were subject to the rules of the archives. Keeping talking to a minimum was a big one. "Let's get dinner together in a few hours." "I look forward to it," he said. Shakti would really like to know why this Mandalorian is shooting at her. She sensed no malice in her opponent, just feral glee and occasional bursts of lust when Shakti fended off several blaster shots at once. The criminals she was fighting from the Crymora Syndicate were also being persistent. She could sense their confusion whenever the Mandalorian flitting around in the sky helped them. Enough! She sent a force push the Mandalorians' way, sending them tumbling far off into the distance while she danced among the Syndicate members, disarming them both literally and figuratively. She was ready to be attacked the moment the Mandalorian returned, but instead they flew up and landed a meter away, radiating disappointment. The Mandalorians' primary armor color was blue and a dirty white, making her wonder if they were Death Watch, even though their colors were apparently blue and gray. However, they also had a lot of customization with lines of blue and white triangles circling their pauldrons and vambraces, as well as fur edging their flight suit. Shakti wondered if they were simply from one of the colder Mandalorian planets, like Crown Nest. "Did you have to finish it while I was gone?" they said, pulling off their helmet, which had the design of a smiling creature. Long, bound black hair and brown skin was revealed along with blue eyes. "Did you have to finish it while I was gone?" they asked, pulling off their helmet, which had the design of a smiling creature. Long, bound black hair and brown skin was revealed along with blue eyes. "I'm Korla Anui, Clan Imik House Ren, she, her. Nice to meet you." She was surprisingly friendly for someone who had been shooting at Shakti a moment before. "I'm Jedi Master Shakti. Is there a reason you were attacking me?" asked Shakti. "I was, just keeping you on your toes. You were doing so well on your own and didn't need my help." Shakti looked the Mandalorian over. She wasn't good at gauging human age, but the woman seemed young. Korla groaned. "Look, I really like you. I think we were meant to meet here today." "When you shot at me," said Shakti flatly. Korla rubbed her head sheepishly. "That really is how Mandalorians say hello. Look, please, just grab a calf with me when you're done here. I promise I'll make it up to you." "How old are you?" asked Shakti. 18? That explained the immature approach. "I'm old enough to be your grandmother, though admittedly a younger grandmother. I suggest you try with younger Jedi, and that you avoid the Mandalorian custom of attacking people you just met." Korla bowed and her shoulders slumping. "Fine." She brightened after a second thought. "Before you go, can I get a hollow with you?" "No! Damn it!"